Imagine going to sleep in one of America's fastest-growing cities, a city full of ambition, wealth, and wooden buildings stacked close together. Now imagine waking up to a wall of fire, a fire so powerful it would swallow entire neighborhoods whole. By morning, thousands of buildings would be gone, and over 100,000 people would have nowhere to go. This is the story of the night Chicago burned, a disaster so massive it would reshape an entire city forever.
By 1871, Chicago was one of the fastest-growing cities in America. Just 40 years earlier, it had been a small frontier town. Now it was a booming center of trade, railroads, and industry. Grain, lumber, and livestock poured into the city every single day. Chicago's population had exploded to nearly 300,000 people. New arrivals came from across America and overseas, all searching for work, opportunity, and a new life. But this rapid growth came with a dangerous flaw hidden beneath the progress. Most of the city was built almost entirely out of wood. Even the sidewalks in many streets were made of wooden planks. Building codes at the time did little to prevent disaster. Homes, barns, and warehouses were packed tightly together with almost no space between them. The summer and fall of 1871 had been unusually dry. Only a few inches of rain had fallen in months, and the wooden city had become a tinderbox waiting to ignite at any moment. Firefighters were already exhausted from a difficult season. Just one day earlier, a separate fire had burned for hours across the city. It left the fire department stretched thin and worn out before the real disaster even began. Equipment was damaged, men were tired, and morale was low. No one knew that an even greater disaster was only hours away, waiting to test the city beyond anything it had ever faced. On the evening of October 8, 1871, disaster began quietly in a small barn on Koven Street. Something sparked a flame, though the exact cause has never been fully confirmed. A popular legend blamed a cow kicking over a lantern, but historians believe the true cause may never be known. What is certain is how quickly the flames began to spread through the dry wood and hay inside the barn. Within minutes, the fire leaped to nearby buildings. A neighborhood of wooden homes stood dangerously close together, with no fire breaks to stop it. Strong winds from the southwest fanned the flames violently, pushing them forward. What started as a small barn fire became an unstoppable force. The first fire crews arrived, but they were already overwhelmed by the speed and size of the blaze. Confusion and delayed alarms slowed the emergency response. By the time crews reached the scene, the fire had grown massive and out of control. The flames began jumping from rooftop to rooftop with terrifying speed. The wind carried burning debris far ahead of the fire itself, starting new fires blocks away. Panic began to spread through the surrounding neighborhoods as the night lit up. Families woke to the smell of smoke filling their homes. Many barely had time to grab their loved ones and flee into the streets. The fire was no longer a local incident. It was a city-wide emergency growing by the minute. Fire bells rang constantly, but the sound was drowned out by crackling flames and shouting crowds trying to escape the advancing wall of fire. By midnight, the fire had grown into something unimaginable. The intense heat created its own violent weather system. Firestorm winds roared through the streets like a hurricane, and the flames moved faster than people could run. Streets themselves seemed to turn into rivers of fire, and the extreme heat caused stone and iron structures to crumble and collapse. Even structures thought to be fireproof were destroyed in the heat. Families fled with only what they could carry in their arms. Some grabbed photographs, others grabbed nothing but each other. The Chicago River briefly seemed to offer safety, but even the river's surface reflected the terrifying glow. Bridges became dangerously overcrowded with panicked crowds trying to cross. Some bridges caught fire from flying embers landing on them. Thousands pushed toward the shoreline of Lake Michigan. Many waded into the cold water simply to escape the heat behind them. Firefighters battled desperately, but the flames were unstoppable. Water pressure in the city suddenly and mysteriously failed when a key pumping station was damaged by the fire itself.
Without water, firefighters were left almost completely helpless against the blaze. The fire continued burning through the night without mercy. It consumed homes, churches, stores, and entire city blocks without stopping. Landmarks that had defined the city began to disappear into smoke and ash. By early morning, the destruction seemed almost endless and impossible to measure.
Amid the chaos, ordinary citizens became extraordinary heroes. Neighbors helped neighbors escape burning homes, and strangers carried the elderly and injured to safety. Some risked their own lives running back into burning buildings to search for trapped family members. Horse cart drivers offered free rides to fleeing families, and business owners abandoned their shops to help others.
Survivors later described scenes of both terror and courage. One family survived by sheltering near a freshly dug grave. Others survived by submerging themselves in wells and ponds. Firefighters worked through complete exhaustion, without rest. Some collapsed from smoke inhalation, but continued fighting anyway. Doctors and nurses treated the injured in makeshift shelters across the city.
Churches and public halls opened their doors to survivors. Strangers shared food, blankets, and whatever comfort they could offer in the cold night. In the darkest night in the city's history, humanity still shined through the smoke. The spirit of the people refused to break, even as everything around them burned to the ground and disappeared.
By the morning of October 10th, the fire finally began to fade. Rain finally arrived, helping extinguish the last of the flames. But the damage left behind was almost unimaginable. Roughly 3.5 square miles of the city lay in ashes. More than 17,000 buildings had been destroyed, and over 100,000 residents were left completely homeless.
Entire neighborhoods that once bustled with life were simply gone. Landmarks, businesses, and family homes had vanished overnight. Survivors wandered the streets in stunned disbelief. Many searched desperately for missing family members. The exact death toll remains uncertain to this day. Historians estimate around 300 people lost their lives in the fire.
News of the disaster spread rapidly across the entire country. Donations and supplies began arriving from cities across America. Even cities as far as Europe sent aid and support. Temporary shelters were quickly built to house the homeless. Relief committees organized food, clothing, and medical care. Despite the devastation, a spirit of resilience began to emerge from the ashes.
Almost immediately, Chicago's leaders vowed to rebuild stronger than before. The disaster forced the city to completely rethink construction. New building codes required fireproof materials like brick and stone, and wooden construction was banned in much of the city center. Architects saw an opportunity to build something entirely new. Chicago became a testing ground for revolutionary steel frame architecture.
Within just a few years, the city had rebuilt at incredible speed. New streets, taller buildings, and modern infrastructure emerged across the landscape. The population continued to grow even faster than before. Businesses returned, and the economy rebounded remarkably fast. Within a decade, Chicago had become a global symbol of resilience. The Great Chicago Fire destroyed a city, but it could not destroy its spirit. From the ashes rose a stronger, more modern Chicago.